don't give a fuck. Tyler, the your little call to action, the food, energy, water, and I've added other factors: shelter, medicine, air, recycling, transport, all that other shizzle.
Uh-huh.
It's going really well, by the way. So I just want to say thank you because it's I've started doing week daily rooms, and we're getting like 1,500-2,000 people in the really busy rooms now. So it's really good. It's a really really interesting topic area because it's just there's so many angles to it. So I
I
just
think,
wanted to thank you for
I,
suggesting it. I'm kind of
yeah,
no,
well,
I'm
it should,
trying to show people how to actually do it rather than just think about it.
yeah, it should be, that topic should become more and more relevant as the clusterfuck unfurls. And
Yeah, so shit hits the fan exactly.
yeah, because a year
And
ago, I mean, I've been ranting about this for 6, 7 years now, and 6 years ago when I decided to go fully off grid, like people looked at me like I was fucking cuckoo, and people don't think so anymore. So, and that's largely due to the post-COVID, post, supply chain, China separation, and all of this crazy Russia invasion. Just where the world is at today. It doesn't seem crazy at all that you want to take control of your own water and food and energy. It seems like a very sane thing to do now. So I think I think that the as we as things progress, things will become less and less stable, and people are going to naturally, at least the ones that have any sort of sense of self preservation, are going to start um, seeking out expertise or guidance, whatever you want to call it, assistance or what have you. Sorry, Pat, you were saying?
Thank you, Tyler. I just wanted to add a little bit to that news article you were referring to about the blackouts and the factory
No,
close downs
just
this week. Yeah, in Sichuan, because it's connected with the low water levels on the Yangtze River, I believe, and I find that very interesting because the Yangtze feeds so many other parts of Southeast Asia. That what impact will that have on them further down the line? Especially with the Three Rivers Gorge Dam or whatever it's called. If water supplies are that low around there, it's going to be scary downstream towards the ocean. Thank you.
mhm.
Hey, I have a good news too. I just started to grow my own basil and chili.
There you
Let's see
go.
whether it works.
That's how it starts. It's baby steps and growing.
Well, it's a start.
Yeah, it's a real start because
Yes.
it becomes a real habit very quickly when you start growing your own herbs and stuff, and you use them in your cooking. You'll be surprised how much you enjoy it. And I think it's
Oh, it's amazing. I started with mint only, and few years later, I'm growing tomatoes, zucchini, blackberries, pears, and it just spreads quickly. And the convenience, like you just go outside, break, few of like rosemary sprigs and add that to whatever you're cooking. It's just amazing how easy it is to do.
yeah. By the way, you will also get a similar sort of, you should anyway. At least I do. I imagine Ben does. You get a sort of thrill of knowing, when you are consuming the water that is not from the government um, issued source, or electricity that's not from a government issued source. You similarly get, you kind of, there's a weird level of awareness and consciousness of it, and that it has a strange sort of
Satisfaction.
satisfaction is a great word. I would even say a calming sort of feeling of security, a sense of security. Maybe that's what it is you have a newfound sense of security that you didn't think that you would have, or um, anyway.
Absolutely. There was a news article that may have rolling blackouts in the winter in the UK as a strategic plan to deal with potential energy shortages and your energy might be off for 24, 48 hours. I'm like, well, bring it on. We just did that to ourselves on purpose a few days ago as a test.
Right.
That feels very different to how that same news has felt in the past when I've heard that. I'm not sure what the technical term is. Shat the bed, I think, is the emotional reaction that a psychologist would use. So, yeah.
By the way, when the power does go down in the government grid, in my part of Thailand, and I'm the only one around, and which is fairly often, by the way. It's like once a month it goes down, um, and my uptime is way better than the government's uptime here in Thailand. And when everyone's down and I'm not, I can't explain how. Maybe it's a perverse sort of psychopathic, jubilation. What's the word I'm looking for? What's the opposite?
Smug.
Manic. I go through a manic episode.
Snobbery.
It's a smug mania. Uh,
Unlimited power.
yeah, I feel like what's the guy with the Thanos collecting the rings? Like when he gets the last ring.
Oh no, the Sith, the Lord, Sith Lord with unlimited power.
I feel like Thanos once
Is
he
that
finds
because he's follically challenged? You
the
go to the
last
Sith?
the last Infinity Stone. If you remember that part of the
Thanos,
Avengers movie, yeah, that's what it.
Thanos, okay.
Hey Tyler, it's Maher here. How you doing, buddy? It's been a while.
Yeah,
Got a question for you, all right? Because I've been looking into this for a while, as far as like what's a good uh, topography to get, when I guess shit goes down. So what I kind of came up with so far was I'm thinking like marsh areas next to wetlands, right? And if you did an overlay of like wind on top of the wetlands, right, then you can kind of get high where the high wind is located, so you can get yourself wind power, and then also obviously some solar power, right? And then I think that most people won't be like rushing to swamps and areas like that. And but you have like tons of protein supply, and it's pretty cheap land, and people aren't necessarily going to be going out there. Um, what are your thoughts on like what's the best topography areas and to be looking for to kind of be safe and have
I don't.
abundant food
Listen,
and things like that
so
around you?
You may also want Albert to jump in there, by the way.
yeah.
And you also want to perhaps consider Louisiana. That's where I am. I have a land with marsh and lake around me, and plenty of fish and other stuff.
I mean,
Yeah,
theoretically,
like one of the guys at the hotel that I'm staying at here was from Louisiana, and he showed me pictures. Dude said he pulls out 40 fish in like a
Yeah.
couple hours. I
Oh
was like,
yeah.
whoa,
There's
that's
so much
incredible.
fish in my back. The lake behind my yard. People just catch all the time, and plenty of fish, plenty
I
of
thought the question
wildlife
is
to
for
feed on.
Tyler. How come he has no chance to
that's all right.
talk?
They're raising great points. I happen to be on a beach which has fish and all kinds of protein sources, and that's something to be mindful of. If you can be around rejuvenating protein sources, fantastic. Uh, I think having a lake is let me put it this way: for those who have the means to do, if you get, if you think like billionaire status, to me, the ultimate is to have your own fully stocked freshwater lake with a mountain stream that runs into it, and even better if you can build hydropower off of it and everything else, which you could do. I mean, if I was a billionaire, I would certainly do that.
But do you have to be a billionaire to do it? You can't you just go like next to the parks and just figure it out, like, and just do it yourself with a few things, right? Like being mobile
Yeah,
and
there's
the
videos
marsh.
of dudes in parts of Northern California, Oregon, that purchased pieces of former logging land, which was relatively cheap, redwoods no less, and they have streams running through that they convert into hydropower that power their house. They grow all their own food. They grow all, they're fully off grid and have been. There's one guy on YouTube, he's been fully off grid for 50 years.
He's been
Which
doing it for 50. Wow,
50.
that's
Mayor, you have
incredible.
the guy immediately to your left is in a similar boat. I might just hasten to add. Mayor.
Yeah.
People in Louisiana have been doing it for a long time. Because of the marshland and the lower level, because it's like a basin. Whenever they build a subdivision or even their home, they buy like acres of land. dig a hole, get the dirt out to build the base of the house, and that land that is, the bowl kind shape filled up with water naturally, and then they stock it with fish, and naturally the wildlife grows, and here they consume frogs and alligators and all kind of aquatic life. And in summer season, they go and hunt in the jungle and stock the freezers with deer meat and all that. So they are completely living that way and grow their own vegetables. And for energy, I mean, they do different ways. Some of them do get the energy from city, but then some are completely off grid. And this is the way they live for, you know, a long time. Another positive aspect is when you grow your own food, your health improves because of your gut microbiome and the connection with the dirt. So there are many positive aspects of this kind of living.
This is Albert Bates speaking. I'm been called out a couple times now by my number one fan, Ben. So I figured I better chime in. I'm a longtime lurker, first time speaker on the stage here. And I am former president and chairman of the Global Eco Village Network. So I know a lot about being off grid. A lot of eco villages are off grid. I've been off grid for close to 50 years. And I don't lean towards doing this yourself or just with your family. I know there's lots of examples of people who are very successful at that, but honestly, I think it's more of a town thing. It's more of a gathering with your friends in your tribe to do a larger than single family setup. It gives you greater security. It divides labor. It has lots of advantages for the old and the young. So eco villages is my tech of choice.
Very cool, Robert.
Do you have somebody you recommend?
Well, you can look at ecovillage.org, which lists about 6,000 around the world, and pick your climate of choice. I spend much of my time here at the farm in Tennessee, and I'm quite happy here with my 100, 200 neighbors. But I also spend a fair amount of time in the Caribbean where I'm working on carbon dioxide removal projects of various kinds. I have projects in Belize and Guatemala and uh, Panama, Dominican Republic, and Mexico. I spent most of the 2 years of the pandemic, the last 2.5, 3 years, in Mexico on an island in a nature preserve with dirt roads and golf carts. And that was actually very secure, although, like Tyler, we have frequent power outages, and you might have a power outage once a week or so. But, I have now Starlink there, and I'm quite independent and can write books. I've written 5 books while I'm living there. I actually very much enjoy being out in nature, but also being in a small town with lots of people.
What do you not miss about living in the city or living in like greater integrated civilization?
Oh, I do miss stuff from living in the cities. And when I visit places, I spend a lot of time traveling and lecturing. And so when I visit a major city, I'm going to do a crawl of the art galleries. I will attend a concert or whatever might be happening at that time, just to get back to the culture because I miss that part. I miss the culture. And I lived in New York City when I was going to graduate school and kind of enjoyed that experience. But I actually much prefer being a country boy, being out in the country. So for me, the city is a nice place to visit, but I wouldn't want to live there.
Well, you said
Yeah,
you've
so
been doing
my
this for 50 years, 50?
Yeah, well, I got here in '72. The farm started in '71 with 325 hippies coming in a long caravan of school buses from San Francisco, kind of an exodus, a diaspora from the Haight-Ashbury, and settled on 2,000 acres of land here in Tennessee. And I got here in '72, so I'm a newcomer, but they're gradually accepting me.
Dude, let's do a room on just this, like later. This is a
yeah.
cool
So,
topic, bro.
do you
You
mind if
know?
I just add quickly? I think Albert's lifestyle and mine are fairly similar, although I'm newer. I'm a VC, but I live in northern Tanzania near Mount Meru. So I'm not a billionaire status. I don't have my own private lake or mountain, but I'm by a mountain. Kilimanjaro's not far from me. The second tallest in Tanzania, Meru, is right next to me. next to wildlife, and I have a river next to me. And I have neighbors, and I think what Albert said about going with the sort of village approach really resonates with me because initially I thought when I moved, I built my house last year. I moved, so I've been living there for a year. Initially thought that yeah, I have access to a river. I use it to water my garden. I was gonna do a bunch of stuff, but learning from your neighbors and particularly on security is really important because you want to know who's around you and you can do neighborhood watch. I actually got almost burgled last on Sunday on my birthday, which is very surreal. But I had a lot of tech systems kick in that saved my place from being robbed. But that also made me be more aware of my neighbors. The issue of water also is really important because even though we have a river water streams coming off the mountain, I'm actually very nervous that if those who can afford it start building their own massive wells or underground tanks, you already start to hear the villagers start to kind of come knocking and say, "Hey, you're hogging all the water. You know, you're more upstream than us, and you're taking all the water." Even if you're actually just storing it for maybe the rain or something else, I think taking a more village approach is more sound, particularly in places like Africa, where there's more of a community aspect because you never know when you'll need to rely on them. You know, just to help each other out, but particularly for security, I think it's really really important. And dividing up the labor thing is a really really important thing because yeah, you know I have my dad has other parts of land next to me. I don't want it to be one big compound for one family. I'd rather subdivide it into a village. And for example, the solar that I've installed, and if I do any more water storage, I want to share that with others. So because I kind of have this lifestyle where maybe 3 to 4 to even 6 months of the year I'm not there, I go into the cities, right? Because I do miss them. And when I'm not there, there's all this solar power that's not being used and all this water maybe that could be used by someone else. So I'd rather take that up, and also security. When I'm away, that's when people plot stuff. I mean, I was on my birthday away, and that's how I got broken into. But if you have more people around you who you're in your community, it's going to be much easier to kind of sustain that. But anyway, that's my thoughts.
My wife and I have been practicing division of labour for years now. I do the dividing and she does the labour. It works out pretty well. I think. I don't know if she get the same answer from her. But anyway,
That's a good joke.
Sorry about that. There was a couple of other things I can't remember. Yeah, timescale I think really matters. You do different things depending on where you are, whether you're in an apartment in a city or on a farm in Texas. Has got hugely different things you do. But it also depends on what timescale. If you're only looking for 3 days of resilience, which by the way, if everybody had that, would make a huge difference. You'd have a lot less people whinging when the water goes off for 3 days and you call 911 or 112, the international emergency number, and they're like, well, screw you, everybody's calling us with that problem, we can't help. The time frame makes a huge difference. So we're just going through every different time frame, stuff that might work even if you're in an apartment in a city, especially for the shorter time frame. So it's quite fun. And today we're talking about something completely different, which is a carbon cost of code, because we all sit on Clubhouse talking about the environment while server farms belch out a good few percent of the world's CO2. So and a lot of that's because of crap code. So that's what we're doing today. But anyway, it's a fascinating set of topics. Anyway, I just wanted to thank you, Tyler, for and slightly promote what we're doing by by thanking you.
We should do just like an off-grid prepping room, you know, and get everybody in there. It'd be fun.
You've been gone a
We do
while.
that every day.
He's got 25 episodes of it. If you go check out his profile, scroll down, you'll see that we've been doing this for
That's
now
so awesome.
cataloged as seasons. So
Wait.
More like 40, David.
Wait. So I just
trying to make
it's,
it smaller piece so he's not so intimidated. But we have been doing it. Welcome back to the app, and you've been hosting some cool rooms.
yeah.
But just jump on our bandwagon and not reinvent the wheel.
Yeah, I don't know. That's fantastic. Like that's beautiful news. That's so awesome. Like I'm like this is so like fantastic. It's so much better when stuff's already done, you know. So and it's very interesting that we're all kind of even though I stepped out for a while, right, and like went through depression for a little bit because I crashed and burned out for a little bit, but now I'm trying to come back, right? So that's just real, you know. So but now you know it's really nice to see that everybody's still on the same wavelength, you know. It's amazing, right? So I'm happy to be back, guys.
Great discussion, everyone. And I also just wanted to take this moment to recognize Ben. Ben, your room was highlighted yesterday during the Clubhouse Town Hall. In fact, it started out as we are highlighting tech news, and specifically, we're going to highlight the sustainability rooms that have been hosted. And they pointed out the most recent one where it was about the environmental impact of pets. And they did highlight this upcoming room that you just shared up here, the carbon cost of crap code. So Congratulations, Ben, and thank you so much, Tyler, for having this space. And I'm also really enjoying this off-grid conversation. Albert, I sent you a message just wondering if you have any one of those eco villages in Jamaica, because I'm looking to bring my family there and just start a community and something similar. So really inspired to hear that we might be creating an offshoot room to just discuss like the practicality of it, because as you've all said, we have shared a lot of tips on off-grid living, but in terms of just applicability in certain countries, that's what my family and I are really interested in. Thank you all.
There are eco villages or projects of various kinds in Jamaica. If you go to ecovillage.org, there's a whole database there, and you can look it up by country.
Okay.
One thing I want to say real quick is like my mind is blown by the fact that like in as far as time scale is concerned, like what Starlink just did, like what Elon just did with Starlink is like crazy nuts, like a huge big deal, right? Like all of a sudden, all of this land out there that nobody would really use because it can't be connected. Well, you can use a lot of it now if you can have access to solar, wind, and protein. It just like Starlink just unlocked like so much more land out there. You just need road access, so it just all those are now capable to be productive. So it's pretty incredible times.
It's pretty
I don't know
crazy,
if anyone.
actually. Sorry, go
I
ahead.
want to bring up, yeah, Ben. Maybe you might know this. I saw an article, a YouTube video about apparently Starlink getting slower in some parts of the U.S. because of what was mentioned. Just people are all getting their camper vans, their van lives, getting a Starlink on board and moving to that area, and the congestion from that area then lowers the speed of the Starlink.
Yeah,
From the
it's got a
that's what I've heard
population
that it can
density
happen.
limit.
So be careful
Yeah,
where
yeah.
you end up going, and then there's 100 other people right next to you might have a slower connection because everyone's doing the same thing as you.
I would say swamp areas and low-lying areas, you have to think of hurricanes and uh, rising sea levels in some places.
Well,
Anyway,
I'm surprised that
Yeah,
nobody's mentioned
hurricane.
water containtion yet.
Okay. Well, we will.
Moving
Hurricanes are a
on.
real thing,
Here
but
we
we
go.
know how.
Moving on.
Moving on, and I'll make a transition out of the water contamination issue. The headline story in a printed newspaper from Switzerland. The headline story says on the front page of the newspaper, physical newspaper in Switzerland, says no tap water. That's the headline story in Switzerland, and it seems to be that the formerly pristine Swiss drinking water, which they're kind of renowned for, the water level has gotten so low that the glaciers, when they melt pristine water until the glaciers get really, really, really small towards the tail end of their melting is not pristine ice. It's kind of mixed with gravel and dirt and whatnot. And so the old glacier melt is releasing bacteria into the water system. So now the water system's contaminated with bacteria that had previously been part of the glacier because it's getting to the end.
Prehistoric bacteria.
So there's no more drink. All of a sudden, miraculously, they went from having some of the best water in the world to zero, none, no drinking water, no tap water. That means no showers. It means no water. Your residence, your town, your entire city has no water and no source of water. You have to truck in water from other towns and other sources. You don't want to be in that situation. This is Switzerland, one of the best run places on the planet by any metric. Very thoughtful, well governed, arguably. I mean, relatively. And if they can find themselves in situations where they were, now find themselves without water, I don't care where you live. I mean, maybe Norway might have an argument, but other than that, you are more likely than them to find yourself in a similar situation. So anyway, that's my rant for that. So the big tech story today is from Bloomberg, that Nick Clegg, who's at Facebook, who used to be in the British government, at very high level. He was, what was he, like a deputy prime minister or whatever, who was running for prime minister. Anyway, he went over to Facebook, and then now he's sharing Facebook's plans to help secure the U.S. midterm elections. Big whoopee. TikTok makes its elections center available in the United States, offering state-by-state info ahead of the midterms and details its misinformation policy. Next up, former Nintendo female contract testers in the U.S. describe years of sexual harassment, gender discrimination, and a lack of advancement opportunities for women. For years? Former Nintendo female contract testers in the U.S. describe years of sexual harassment. How does that happen? Why wouldn't that have been reported in year one?
And Nintendo is very litigious, so and they have very strict control over brand, PR, everything. So if there was an issue, I suspect they probably nipped it in the bud right away.
That just
But
sounds,
it's kept going.
something sounds odd that it could go on for years. The lack of advancement opportunities for women at some point around year three, you would think there would have been a reaction. Anyway, next up, Alphabet, aka Google, invested $1.5 billion in blockchain companies between September 2021 and June 2022, the most by any public company, followed by BlackRock with $1.17 billion. Now, that might sound strange with the I don't know, the crypto apocalypse unfolding, and yet I'll tell you this: Google and BlackRock, they know what they're doing. Those are some incredibly savvy investors, like ridiculously so. They have access to data that the rest of us do not have. And the times that I've been in really interesting gatherings or meetings or whatever you want to call them, where high profile Google representatives are there or BlackRock representatives are there, it's shit that blows my mind every time. The access to information that they have is just mind blowing. So if they're throwing billions into something, they know something that the rest of us don't. I can assure you of that. So over similar to Bill Gates buying up farmland, who, by the way, people even here in tech news around the world, when that was first being reported, it was widely criticized. Although Bill's not the kind of person you criticize, but it certainly was a paradox. Why is Bill Gates hoarding farmland? Doesn't seem so strange anymore. Doesn't seem strange at all. Bill had some information that the rest of us didn't have. So
I remember some of the jokes about Bill with farmland. It's as if he took Facebook farmland too seriously and started losing his mind. But obviously, it was next level play at multi layers of complexity. So the kind of coordination you can get as an international non-government organization is pretty amazing nowadays.
I want to ask you something, Tyler. Like, think about this: all the data, right? Because even platform companies, whether it's Stripe or Spotify or all these different folks, right? At the end of the day, they're pretty much on AWS or Google or Azure, right? And I'd imagine that people at the top levels over there, they probably have access to or ways to get to that data, right? Like, if you have a question, you can probably get the answer with all that data in there. What are your thoughts on them? Like, do you think they're going into all the data? Because it's pretty much all sitting there on their servers, right?
A lot of it's encrypted, don't they?
I think the access to information I'm talking about is more intelligence agency related, not necessarily, but just people with. I'll give you an example. Here's my best example. Is I went to a meeting at SpaceX headquarters. How many years ago was this? 7 years ago. And it was just not that many people. I've told this story before. It was, I don't know, 20-ish people. Elon was there. And so was Larry Page from Google. So was Nathan Myhrvold from Microsoft, Bill Gates' best buddy and kind of like the real genius behind Microsoft. And a whole bunch of, just a shit ton of people there, like really incredibly impressive folks. Sean Parker, who was the first president, who, creator of Napster and first president of Facebook. Anyway, all rather equally impressive. And the George Church and Craig Ventner were there to talk about what's going on in genomics to this audience of billionaires, myself excluded. And the idea was that George Church and Craig Ventner know what's going on in genomics in a way that very few people, if anybody on the planet, do. And they were talking about how one of the big concerns that they both share, they're dear friends, and they are the world's leading authorities on genomics and genetic engineering and editing. And they were saying how the U.S. is not allowing for innovation in that space to happen. They regulate it, and China's not regulating it. And China's going to just go way faster because they're going to want to try and make clone armies or whatever of super babies or whatever. But the real concern is that America is going to lag behind, and that's a concern. And Sean Parker said, is that what keeps you up at night? That was his question. And George said, who, by the way, created life in the lab out of non-living material, just to give you a sense for how profoundly impressive these individuals are. George said, no, that's not what keeps me up at night. And Sean said, well, what does keep you up at night? And he says, do you really want to know? And the whole room was like, yeah. And he says, well, basically, the cost of genetic engineering is going to drop so much, so quickly that in the very near future, and he estimated in about 5 years, and by the way, this was about 7 years ago, that the cost of genetic engineering will be such that people can make viruses like a smallpox variation of sorts that is airborne and, has a very high contagious factor and very deadly and airborne. And that keeps me up at night because that's going to happen and there's nothing we can do about it. And the whole room gasped and whatever. And then the next day, Craig Venter came in and said the exact same thing. Then they both agree that that's just a reality we're going to have to come to terms with. And then, because Nathan Myhrvold was in the room, who, as I mentioned, is Bill Gates' closest friend and kind of partner and collaborator, shortly thereafter, about a year later, not even a year later, Bill Gates goes on and does a proper TED Talk all about we need to get ready for a massive pandemic. And gee, I wonder which one he's talking about. Well, you and I now know exactly which one he's talking about. Is the genetically engineered pandemic, but there was a problem. He couldn't say that out loud because he doesn't want to tip off the bad actors that they should be looking in that direction as an alternative to causing global havoc, or as an alternative to nuclear weapons or whatever. So it was all very hush hush. And Bill, and I've been watching Bill very closely for very many years, and every single interview he's ever done, he references this, and as almost like it's a condition of the interview about, oh, Bill, what's on your mind these days? Anyway, so then Bill gets post-COVID, a lot of interviews about, oh, wow, you said a pandemic was coming. And he says now in the interviews now, yeah, but that's not what I was talking about. And now he does say out loud that he was in his most recent interviews, he is saying out loud, I was talking about a genetic engineered bioterrorism attack. And so that's the type of access to world, just profoundly, some of the world's leading innovators and movers and shakers get together and discuss these things. And I can tell you that Larry Page set up in New Zealand shortly after that. So did Peter Thiel. like it was shortly thereafter that the Silicon Valley elite started getting New Zealand citizenships and passports, and Fiji and other places where they feel they're going to be very safe. And I moved to Thailand as sort of a result of that meeting, in fact. So anyway, that my point is that these folks get together very somewhat regularly, and they have access to really deep shit that doesn't make it into Bloomberg or even the New York Times or any of that stuff. And it's I forget why we even got into this rant, but anyway.
Could I add something,
Oh,
Tyler?
yeah, to tie the knot, and then I'll hand it to you, John. I mention all this
Yeah.
because Alphabet and BlackRock are throwing billions into blockchain, and it's not totally obvious yet why. But when they are both separately doing that, I I have to assume it's because they have access to some information we don't. Go ahead, John.
Oh, well, I wasn't going to speak to this, but your last point, um, nation state collapse in the overwhelming climate refugee phenomenon is going to lead to problems with fiat currencies and exchange rates. And so I think I think that's no small part of the thinking aligned with this whole smallpox discussion. What I was going to speak to is I've heard Craig and George on multiple occasions refer to the same issue. About 10 years ago, I asked a bioterrorism, and I described this in this room about a year ago. About 10 years ago, I asked a bioterrorist expert in the federal government if they were monitoring for peculiar vaccination campaigns in sort of rogue states, specifically with reference to ISIS at that time. And he looked at me like, why would we do that? And I said, if a nation state sponsors a bioterrorist event, you would expect them to first vaccinate those they want to protect before releasing the engineered virus. And I don't know to this day if there's an intelligence effort to monitor for those kind of vaccination campaigns. But the point that George Church and Craig Venner both have made pretty consistently is it's all ready, and they predicted 7 years ago, as you said, that in 5 years it'd be easy. A high school student today could go online and figure out how to do this.
I'll be back in
And
a minute. Sorry.
yeah, so it just speaks to the fact that um, their access to the kind of information that leads to inexorable socio-political outcomes um, is pretty deep and pretty profound. And their move into crypto is likely a reflection of that same kind of conviction as the farmland that Bill Gates was buying and the concern about engineered bioterrorist pandemics. So um, I think what Tyler's been advocating all along, uh, following his become self-sufficient off the grid, a lot of sense. And the sooner that people who like make efforts to do that, um, the 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 less risk there is to society for the kind of compelled by that concern at the same time, which would make our recent supply chain issues look like a picnic. So, anything that anybody in this room can do to um, provide a resilience, to do to go to rooms and listen to the sage advice coming from that group. Um, but this is not sci-fi. This is not um, uh, wildly speculative. The trends are not heading in the right direction, and unless we find affordable mechanism of carbon capture very soon, Um, the compound effects of all the contributions to climate change are accelerating. They're not linear. The notion that climate change phenomena we can talk about, a 1 years or 2 degree, so those are absurdly underestimating the compound effects of all the contributions to climate change. So it behooves everybody who is aware of this to not worry, but that action globally, and so the sooner the better.
Well, you got one more thing on there, which is like the drone stuff, right? Like, Tyler's been talking about that too. And sure enough, this is the very first drone war over in Ukraine and Russia. But, the biggest, and they're kind of holding back an army. The biggest thing I see out of that is, like, if you really look at it, you have a consumer grade drone that you could go convert and put a bomb on it and go take out a tank, like a full tank, like bzzz, tank gone. That is like unbelievable, right? That's easy to do. Like kids could do it. I was reading articles on this and was asking people to uh, owns, right? Um, I mean, and so that's here. Like what that is, everybody's going to be